In light of the recent college admissions scandal, I also have an admission to make. I also paid to go to the University of Texas. Not in a, my family has an extreme amount of wealth and I'm dumb as rocks, so my parents went behind my back and bribed some people and forged my SAT scores kind of way, but in an I'm poor, I've always been poor, and in a cosmic sense, I paid to get a college education. At the expense of my own mental health and my own financial stability, I got a college degree. College isn't a poor man's game. When you have a safety net of wealth, failure is an option for you. However, for people like me with no money, failure is not an option. It was never an option. Every college freshman, depending on if you're rich or poor, white or minority, first generation or legacy, they experience academic setbacks, awkward situations, small failures, someone breaking up with you, a fight with a roommate, and they feel this feeling that they don't belong. However, white students and wealthy students and students with college graduate parents, they don't take these events in stride. They don't take it seriously or personally. And yeah, they'll feel bad about those things, but it's not something that affects you as deeply as it affects students that are more disadvantaged. A student that has these very specific fears and anxieties that come along with being poor, with being a minority, with being a first generation student, they get set back incredibly when these minor transgressions happen. They interpret these as a permanent indication that they can't succeed or that they won't succeed at UT. And that's why people drop out. They don't see success in their cards, so they drop out, which leaves a significant amount of debt on their already poor financial situation a lot of the times. Here's the thing. Rich kids graduate and poor and working class kids don't. So statistically, about a quarter of college freshmen born into the bottom half of the income distribution will manage to collect a bachelor's degree by age 24, while almost 90% of freshmen born into families in the top income quartile will go on to finish their degree. I had no idea what I was doing when I was applying for college. I was a first generation student. I was so much a first generation student that I didn't even know what that meant. The school that I came from, my high school, was predominantly white, predominantly upper class, and so first generation student wasn't really something that they saw that often. So we didn't have counselors coming to talk to us about financial aid or anything like that when it came to applying for colleges. And because I didn't recognize that I was a first generation student, I didn't even check that box off on my financial aid forms or my applications. And because of that, I missed out on a lot of the things that are provided for students like me. So to put being a first generation student in context, an internal UT report from 2012 showed that only 39% of first generation students graduated within 4 years. Whenever I was in high school, I wasn't able to participate in extracurriculars. My family only had one car, which was usually gone because my mother was working. We lived in a rural town with no sort of public transportation, and also I was having to do other things like run a household or take care of elderly family members, things like that, because we couldn't afford healthcare or, someone to take care of people. So when I was applying for colleges, I looked like a pretty mediocre candidate, and I kind of was, honestly. I've always been smart, but on paper, I looked like a piece of shit, basically. So the first time around, I applied for UT for normal freshman admission, and I didn't get in. But I went to community college for a semester, and I applied again, and then I did get into UT that time. So I was a transfer student. My first semester was really hard. I felt like everyone had already settled. They had time to make friends, get settled into their little niches, whatever. One program that UT has for freshman students is called a FIG, a first year interest group, where they place incoming freshmen that are all in the same program together. So you take all of the same classes, you do extracurricular events together, that sort of thing. It's kind of a way to like get a community right off the bat. However, they don't make that available for transfer students, at least whenever I was attending UT. So I didn't get to participate in that. I felt like I was alone and in the wilderness. I had no idea what I was doing. I hated my classes. I remember during spring break, I went home to my parents and I had a nervous breakdown about how I didn't want to go back to college. And when I went back to school after spring break, there was one day I parked my car at the top of the parking garage next to my dorm. And I genuinely contemplated just jumping off of the parking garage instead of getting into my car. My parents told me that it was okay for me to drop out, that I could just move back in with them and it was fine. They weren't placing this like extreme amount of stress onto me because they had never gone to college before. They didn't know what it was like. They understood that I was really struggling, but I knew that if I didn't finish, my life would always be worse than it was then. So no matter how terrible I was feeling, I knew that if I didn't get a college degree, my prospects would never get better. At least having a degree would allow me to escape from what I had always known. So despite my waning will to live, I kept my head down and just continued to work. So one thing is, the most powerful instrument of economic mobility for low-income Americans is a 4-year college degree. If a child is born in the lowest economic quintile, which means a family that earns $28,000 or less, and she doesn't get a college degree, she only has a 14% chance of winding up in one of the top 2 quintiles. She has a 45% chance of never making it out of that bottom bracket. However, if she does earn a 4-year degree, her prospects change completely. Suddenly, there's a 40% chance that she'll make it into one of the top 2 quintiles, and just a 16% chance that she'll remain at the bottom. So right around the time that I went to UT, they started implementing more interventions for disadvantaged students, but I somehow managed to slip through pretty much every single one of those cracks. As a transfer student, they didn't offer the same orientation that everyone else got. So my UT orientation as a freshman looked like it was one day, just a few hours. I went to one meeting about how to be responsible with my financial aid money, and then I met with my advisor, my academic advisor, and that was basically it. So I put together a schedule and I learned how to spend my money. And that was it. Other freshmen, normal freshmen, get a 3-day immersive experience filled with events, sort of team bonding activities, a bunch of fun stuff. You get to stay in a dorm, that sort of thing. Admittedly, you do have to pay money to do that one, but still, it's different. You get more of a sense of community, a sense of belonging. And that's where a lot of those interventions are implemented that they were talking about. So how did I end up with a degree on time despite falling through all these cracks? It wasn't easy. I struggled a lot. I constantly felt like I was a failure at school. I didn't know who or how to ask for help. My grades were pretty mediocre. Even with access to cheaper medical treatment through the university, I still couldn't afford to do things like go to therapy or get medication. And my depression was terrible, which very much was a combination of stress from school and then, not having friends, that sort of thing, just feeling very alone. However, I was lucky, and that's how I got my degree. I was lucky. I graduated with no debt because I was a recipient of the Texas Tomorrow Fund. So what that is it was this short-lived thing back in the 90s. Basically, I think they only did it for 2 years because they were going to lose a significant amount of money doing it. However, the state of Texas provided this fund where your parents could pay the price of tuition the year that you're born, and that would count for the price of tuition when your child goes to college. So back then, tuition was $11,000. My grandparents paid $11,000 the year that I was born so that I could go to college for free, basically. My tuition was paid for whenever I went to college. I didn't take out any loans because I didn't know how to, and also I didn't think that loans were an option for me also. And I qualified for the maximum amount of federal grants, so I got a full Pell Grant every semester. And even though I had those things backing me up, I could barely afford rent, I couldn't afford food, but somehow I made it out without destroying my life and without perpetuating my family's cycle of poverty. I'm very thankful that I didn't have any debt. That's the only reason that kept me in college, was because I knew that it was paid for, and that, once again, my life would be worse had I not gotten a degree. But a lot of people aren't that fortunate. A lot of people have to take out a lot of loans. A lot of people can't afford to go to college at all. So it was pure luck that I was able to somehow make it through. UT had started implementing all of these interventions, and I didn't even know that these opportunities or programs existed. They weren't really made known to me. Once again, I think that's because of the way that I didn't say that I was a first-generation student when I applied and that sort of thing. I didn't know that this existed until I read the New York Times article that I've been quoting throughout this video. And I didn't know that that article existed until about 3 months before I graduated, because my boyfriend had sent it to me right before I graduated. But had I not had that little bit of financial support, there's absolutely no way that I would have graduated. And I think that's the case for a lot of disadvantaged students. When I look back on my college experience, I'm proud because I did it. But I'm sad because there really wasn't much of an experience. I couldn't afford to go to football games. I didn't fit in the party scene. I didn't really have friends to party with either. And I didn't even have like the greatest grades to show for my lack of socialization. So I made one friend the entire time that I was there. But despite all of the setbacks and shortcomings, I did it. College isn't easy, and it's especially hard if you're poor. So shout out to all my poors that managed to get a good degree. Proud of you. I feel like I'm a good representation of the average university student, and especially the poor university student. If you're not wealthy and you're not advantaged, it's a game of luck to get a degree, and it's a game of luck to better your life. So, if your parents are paying $500,000 for you to get into school, fuck you.